Don't forget that the Pre-Med Playbook Guide to the MCAT is now available on Kindle and paperback. Again, that's the Pre-Med Playbook Guide to the MCAT. This is the MCAT Podcast, session number 97. A collaboration between the medical school headquarters and Next Step Test Prep, the MCAT Podcast is here to make sure you have the information you need to succeed on your MCAT test day. We all know that the MCAT is one of the biggest hurdles you'll face as a pre-med. We're here to give you the motivation and information you need to know to help you get the score you deserve so you can one day call yourself a physician. And welcome to the MCAT Podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here every week. If you didn't know, I have another podcast called The Pre-Med Years that if you're listening to this, you need to listen to the Pre-Med Years. Last week, as I'm recording this, I had the Director of Admissions for the University of Illinois Medical School, and we talked all about how they take an application from A to Z and who gets accepted and who doesn't and why, and how they look at everything along the way. So if you are pre-med, which if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you are, go listen to the Pre-Med Years as well. You can find all of our podcasts at mededmedia.com. That's MEDED media.com. I'm super excited to start a new series here on the MCAT Podcast where we are going to take a full length from Next Step Test Prep, full length 10, and go from the very beginning to the very end. Now, we can't cover every question because every question isn't suited specifically for a podcast. So we're skipping some questions. So it's not like you're going to get every single question on the full length, but you're going to get a lot of them. And I'm excited because we'll go through, we're going to answer the questions, we're going to break them down, and as you go through full-length 10, if you get access to full-length 10, which you can get access to all of Next Step's full lengths over at nextsteptestprep.com, use the promo code MCATPOD, that's all capital letters MCATPOD, to save some money there. You can get access to full-length 10. But we'll start with passage 1, page 1, question 1, right at the very beginning, and move on down the way. So let's go ahead and jump in and say hi to Brian. All right, Brian, we're back for another week of the MCAT Podcast, and I'm excited. We're going to start diving into an actual full length from Next Step Test Prep, full length 10. We're going to pull selective questions and passages from the full length. So it's almost like the listeners are going through a full length for free here on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. Our longtime listeners know that at various points we'll do like themes. We'll have a theme for a few weeks worth of podcasts. But we tend to be very grab baggy, right? We tend to try and give people a good selection of all different kinds of questions. And what we want to do over the next, several months of podcasts is really walk through all of Next Step Full Length 10. Not like literally every question, the ones that are good for podcasts, but for those of our listeners who come to us maybe later in 2018 or even into 2019, we're basically going to hand you a walkthrough of some key questions from this full length in order, starting from chemical, physical section question number 1, straight on through to psychology question number 59.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Me too.
Can you, I want you to do me a favor and keep score for me and give me a score at the end.
All right, absolutely, Ryan.
I'm hoping like 515-ish. I mean, I want to go to a good school.
Sure, right. Get you into the Wash U of podcast med schools.
Yes, I'm going to do it.
All right.
So question 1, passage 1 here for Chem Phys.
Mm-hmm. And again, we're just going to do selections, right? We're not going to read the entire passage. And of course, there's things like charts and diagrams. So we're going to pick out pieces of the passages and questions that will work for those listening to us in the car or at the gym or whatever. So passage 1, I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and then we're going to answer a couple of questions that can be based on that paragraph. So passage number 1, sodium dodecyl sulfate, also known as sodium lauryl sulfate, is an anionic surfactant commonly used in household cleaning and personal hygiene products. In biochemistry and biotechnology, its most frequent use is to denature or linearize proteins and negatively charge the resultant fragments. Proteins treated with SDS can be linearized in a similar fashion to proteins subjected to acid-catalyzed hydration, though the mechanism of action is different. However, Scientists utilizing SDS for this purpose often run into difficulties with proteins that have greater hydrophobic content, typically those found in the contexts with regular exposure to surfactants. So there's our opening paragraph. Ryan, you want to give us question number 1?
I'm still trying to figure out what the heck you just said. But I'll try to read question 1. So which of the following proteins would likely be most accurately analyzed using SDS, which is the sodium dodecyl sulfate, SDS page?
And page is something that is discussed further on in the passage, but a good MCAT student should recognize page, polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis. You got to know your SDS page backwards and forwards before you even walk in on test day.
Backwards and forwards. All right. So I'm already falling behind there. So which of the following proteins would likely be most accurately analyzed using SDS page? And so the paragraph is saying proteins treated with SDS can be linearized in a similar fashion. Scientists utilizing SDS for this purpose run into difficulties with proteins that have greater hydrophobic content. So if we're looking for most accurately, we want ones that have very little hydrophobic content. I'm assuming that's how we take it.
No, that is exactly right, Ryan. Why don't we check the answer choices then?
So we have answer choice A is protein A small protein with many hydrophilic surface structures, typically found free-floating in the bloodstream of mammals. Protein B, a large protein found in the internal portions of the phospholipid bilayer of human white blood cells. Protein C, a large protein found almost exclusively in reptilian adipose tissue. Or protein D, a small protein observed experimentally in the surviving portion of bacterial populations that have been exposed to high doses of surfactants. So, answer choice A, a small protein with many hydrophilic surface structures. So that would tell me no, that's probably not it, because it's basically saying it's lots of hydrophobic. Ooh, wait.
Right. So, for Ryan, for the listeners, you want to reread what the passage told us?
Yeah. So the passage says SDS doesn't work well with greater hydrophobic content. And so answer choice A is a small protein with many hydrophilic surfaces, not hydrophobic surfaces.
Right. And the question was most accurately analyzed.
Yeah. Okay. So that got me right away because I'm like, oh, hydro. And I'm like, I didn't even look at the other part of it, phobic and philic. Okay.
So A is a keeper. Yeah.
Yeah. A looks good. And then the other ones, you'd have to know, okay, internal portions of the phospholipid bilayer. You'd have to try to figure out what's in there and if that'll work, adipose tissue, and et cetera. So how would a student break down these other ones to know that A is the right choice?
Right. And you're right. So one for one, you're on your way to a 528, Ryan. Right. So you would know that the inside of a phospholipid bilayer, the inside of a cell membrane is the fatty portion, the hydrophobic portion. And answer choice C says adipose tissue. Adipose is fatty, hydrophobic. So both choices B and C are hydrophobic. So it actually doesn't matter what the question says. When two answer choices say the same thing, they're both wrong.
Yep.
Right. So already A says hydrophilic, B and C imply hydrophobic. So B and C out.
Yep.
And then D mentions high doses of surfactants. And the thing we read in the passage said scientists run into difficulties with surfactants.
Yep.
So D is out as well.
Okay. So we're left with A. All right.
You want to give us question 2, Ryan?
So question 2, chiral manipulation of which of the following amino acids could theoretically result in a meso compound? Roman numeral 1, methionine. Roman numeral 2, proline. Roman numeral 3, cysteine. And we have 1 only, 2 only, 2 and 3 only, or none of the above.
So the reference to amino acids came a little bit later in the passage, the part that we didn't read. But this, again, you really just have to know your amino acids from outside knowledge. So this is one you could answer even without seeing the passage in front of you. And Ryan, one of the things we say again and again and again about the MCAT is that on one level, there's no such thing as high yield. You have to know everything. Asterisk, Just kidding. There is one really, really high yield thing: amino acids.
Yep.
Every single MCAT ever given ever has at least one, if not 2, 3, or even 4 questions that just ask about amino acid chemistry or amino acid reactions or structures or something. In this case, you have to know what a meso compound is, and then you have to know your amino acids so you know which one could be a meso compound. And so the first part of that is just straight recall, right? A meso compound is a compound that has 2 chiral centers with an internal plane of reflection, right? Like you could put a mirror in the middle of the molecule and it would reflect onto itself, right? So your R chiral center would get reflected onto your S chiral center and so on. Classically, the human body is like a meso compound, right? If you put a mirror down the middle of the human body, one side would reflect onto the other side.
Okay.
And amino acids, as a rule, only have one chiral center. So normal amino acids don't fit this definition. The only amino acids that have a second chiral center are isoleucine and threonine, which students should know. Those are the 2 that have a side chain that have a chiral carbon in them. But even then, they wouldn't have an internal plane of reflection because that other chiral center wouldn't map in a reflection way back onto the main chiral center of the carbon, the alpha carbon. So no amino acid could be a meso compound. Making the right answer here, none of the above.
Okay, that's easy.
Just one other thing I'll add. If you had no idea at all, if you were completely lost, you should guess answer choice B, 2 only, because our Roman numerals were methionine, proline, and cysteine. And proline is one of those weirdo amino acids. So if you're ever completely lost, you can just go, well, I don't know, proline is different. Let me guess that. And you'd get it wrong here, but that's a decent guessing strategy.
Okay. When in doubt, proline.
Yep.
All right. I like it. All right. Question 4. So we skipped question 3. We're going to question 4. This passage states that scientists utilizing SDS page often run into difficulties with proteins that have a greater hydrophobic content, typically those produced by organisms in contexts where surfactants are regularly encountered. So that's just pulled straight from the passage. Mm-hmm. Which of the following is a reasonable explanation of why this might be the case? So now they want you to interpret what was said. So A, the negatively charged sulfate head on the end of sodium dodecyl sulfate cannot easily penetrate hydrophilic regions of the protein due to disrupt non-covalent interactions, thereby inducing higher variability in the ratio of bound SDS to the target protein molecule. These are tough. The negatively charged sulfate head on the head of sodium dodecyl sulfate cannot easily penetrate hydrophobic regions of the protein to disrupt non-covalent interactions, thereby inducing higher variability in the ratio of bound SDS to the target protein molecule. C, the negatively charged sulfate head on the end of sodium dodecyl sulfate cannot easily penetrate hydrophilic regions of the protein to disrupt non-covalent interactions, thereby inducing higher variability in the ratio of unbound SDS to the target protein molecule. Or D, the negatively charged sulfate head on the end of sodium dodecyl sulfate cannot easily penetrate hydrophobic regions of the protein to disrupt non-covalent interactions, thereby inducing higher variability in the ratio of unbound SDS to the target protein molecule.
Whew.
Yeah, so that was a lot. And so in my non-MCAT brain, try to pick apart some of these answers. So all of them say inducing higher variability. So they all say the same thing at the end. Now the question is, what does the middle say? So for question A, it says it cannot penetrate hydrophilic regions to disrupt covalent interactions or non-covalent interactions. B says cannot penetrate hydrophobic regions of the protein. C says cannot easily penetrate hydrophilic regions of the protein. So I would look at A and C because they both say hydrophilic, and I would try to figure out what's different with both of them. Because right off the bat, they kind of look the same.
Right. Well, let's put a pause on that, Ryan, and ask ourselves the question first. A charged molecule, whether it's negative or positive, right? A charged molecule, what can it penetrate versus cannot? Because you're absolutely right. Choice A and C say negatively charged cannot penetrate hydrophilic. And then choices B and D say negatively charged cannot penetrate hydrophobic.
Yeah. And so charged, in my recollection, a charged can't penetrate hydrophilic.
Well, no. So you got that backwards,
okay.
Right? So yeah, you think of like just table salt, right? Na plus Cl minus.
Yeah.
Things that are charged like to dissolve in water, just like table salt dissolves in water, right? So negatively charged can penetrate a hydrophilic region, right? Salts, charged things love water. They love hydrophilic. Right. So right off the bat, A and C are out, right? Because charged things can go to hydrophilic regions.
Yep.
Whereas B and D get it right?
Yeah. So B and D get it right. And so the difference is the end where it says the ratio of bound STS versus unbound STS is really the difference between the two now. So what are we looking at for bound versus unbound? What are we trying to think about?
Right. So then you got to know your SDS page, right? And so this is just a real simple recollection of the mechanism. How do you run an SDS page gel in the lab, right? The SDS binds to the protein and coats it, and then you take that solution with proteins wearing an SDS coat, and those are the things you run through the gel. The unbound SDS, the leftover detergent, who cares? You're not even running that on the gel, right? You're either washing it out or you're not visualizing it at the end. You only care about the SDS that's actually got coated on the protein. So this business in answer choice D about unbound SDS, that's not even a reagent that you're looking at in the gel.
All right. So we'd go with B. Negatively charged sulfate head on the end of sodium dodecyl sulfate cannot easily penetrate hydrophobic regions of the protein to disrupt non-covalent interactions, thereby inducing higher variability in the ratio of bound STS to the target protein molecule.
There we go. So Ryan, two for 3. We're on our way to our 515.
Oh, I don't know if I got 2 there, and I don't even know if I got the first one, but I'll take it. So 1 out of 3.
There you go.
All right, so there you have it. Full length 10 passage 1 questions. I think this is going to be really fun going through all of these questions. I've heard from several students saying, you know what, I like it when you, Dr. Gray, when you screw up and you have to use your thought process to cancel out some questions. That gives me the confidence that I can do that when I am taking the test, and I know how I can at least get rid of a couple answers and increase my odds of getting the right one. So I'm glad that me screwing up is helping you on this journey for getting as high of a score as you can on the MCAT. Again, full length 10, going through all of these. If you are in the market for full length practice tests for an MCAT course, go check out nextsteptestprep.com. Their full length exams are getting an awesome reboot where you get more in-depth answers, actual access to snippets of information from their textbooks to give you more knowledge so you don't have to go bouncing around to different resources. If you miss a question, you get all of the content there as well. The full-length exams look exactly like the AAMC ones that you're going to take on test day, so you're preparing like the real thing on Next Step Test Prep's platform. All right, I hope you have a great week. Come back next week for Passage 2, full-length 10, getting started with this awesome, awesome new series. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.